Hello Space Chums, welcome to episode 6. Can you believe it? We're 6 episodes into season 1 and the sheer momentum is building up to such levels I find quite exciting actually. Thank you firstly to everybody who's been liking, subscribing to the channel. We're getting lots of good feedback from everybody watching us. The more the merrier, so of course as they say in all the best clips, please like, subscribe and ring the bell and you hear all the latest stuff about Technia and liftoff. So without further ado, let's talk about space is huge. How do you market a vacuum? We've got James and Helen from marketing agencies who've got some strong experience about space. So without further ado, let's hit the road. James, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, I'm James. I'm the Growth and Strategy Director for JPC. And we work with clients like AWS, BT and Viasat, helping them across their terrestrial products and services, but also their space technology in terms of understanding how they make really complex propositions simple and talk with real clarity to their audiences about the outcomes that they can help them achieve.
That's very good. And Helen, hello.
So I run a small marketing and PR agency called Radical Moves, and we focus on satcoms industry and space, work with a number of different clients across the sector, a couple of technology companies, a couple of associations, and yeah, just try and help them generate awareness and get out there and get into the market.
That's cool. If we think back over the decades, which we've all been around, etc., space has changed so much in many respects. It's become more democratized. The cost of getting a payload up there has dropped to 4 and 6 a kilo as opposed to $55,000 million. You're working with different companies at different stages of their maturity. Are you experiencing any different challenges? So if I come to you, Helen, with a bright idea, which I remembered for something and can't communicate it properly, is that different to, say, the challenges perhaps which James is dealing with the more established, mature companies? An interesting opening question, perhaps.
I think so. I think the main thing is that if you're at different stages, then what you're trying to achieve with the marketing might change slightly. So a mature company like Viasat, AWS, everyone knows who they are. They might not know all the detail, they might not know all their propositions, but they know the company, they know that sort of, to some degree, what they do. If you're starting with a startup, no one knows them yet. Maybe they are run by people that are known in the industry, but so a lot of that initial marketing effort needs to be about raising awareness. Also, you might be challenged by budget, of course, so that limits what you can do. And then as they grow, you get to a point where you need to start thinking about lead generation and how marketing can support sales and get leads in the door. But people need to know who you are first and also know that you know what you're doing, especially in this sector.
And I suppose from a marketing perspective, you're helping them raise their awareness from a funding perspective, because how do you tell the story to a prospective investor like James?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's cool. And James, you're working with mature companies. Do you get involved in less mature businesses? I mean, a little bit about your experiences.
Yeah, so I've got experience of working with startups as well as enterprise organizations. And I think what we have to consider is that for space technology, even within big, mature, established businesses, it still needs a startup mentality. It still needs a fresh approach, a different way of thinking, an understanding that actually, specifically from a marketing and sales perspective, it requires a slightly different approach, a different set of skills that they may have honed around developing their propositions and go-to-markets for their terrestrial products. And that's often one of the challenges that we face in working with larger organizations is just getting them to break the intellectual status quo and think we do need to think differently about this. There is a different requirement in terms of how we communicate. The audiences are slightly different, the way that we sell the proposition. But I think there's one fundamental challenge, which is from a marketer's perspective, whether you're dealing with a startup or whether you're dealing with an enterprise organization, is that fundamentally it's an engineering mentality in these businesses, right? Yeah. They are really smart people that are absolutely devoted and dedicated to their product. And they want to talk at length about the complexity and the cleverness and the intricacy and the journey that they've been through to arrive at this really fantastic and visionary thing, whatever it is. What we have to keep saying to them, which can become quite awkward sometimes, is your audience largely doesn't care. They want to know, at the end of the day, they want to know, what does it do for them? What's the outcome it can help them achieve? And whether that's a startup or a big business, that challenge can sometimes be common across both of them.
And it's interesting, we're talking over the last five episodes, pardon me, what repeatedly comes up is it's not goldfish bowls on your head and shiny boots and magnetic suits, etc. It's about the benefits of it. It's about the impact, and cliche alert now, we can talk about terminology, but it's the downstream side of things. It's how it impacts on people. Helen, what do you find about how to get people to realise, the businesses you work with, they've got to be talking about these benefits as much rather than the shiny button to press?
Yeah, I mean, it's it is that challenge of getting them to. So the first thing is you need to understand their tech speak. It's almost like you're a translation.
Yeah. Yep.
So you need to understand what it is they do, and the more you work within, because I've worked in the industry for a long time. Hopefully that helps me understand some of that, how that translates into the benefits, and so you can kind of help guide them, but it is equally sort of asking the right questions to get them to that point where you understand what does it mean for your customer, and then you can turn that into messaging. And it's also things like, if you're looking at sort of a pure PR front of things, magazines are not going to, unless you pay them lots of money, run a piece that says, we've got this product and it's great and here are all the benefits even. So it's talking about, but how do you then raise your profile, raise your knowledge, show your knowledge and expertise with more thought leadership approach to things, with things like articles or speaking at events. You can't just turn up at an event and say our product's great. No one will ever ask you to talk again. So it's kind of working with them to tease that out, and then also sort of find the angles that make sense, that are related and show what they know, but not necessarily always relating to what it is that they're doing.
A supplementary question has just gone pinging through my ears as we talked about this. That's the whole joy of these episodes. We know we'll be talking about what we're going to be talking about because we prepare for this. But is there a communication issue? Are we talking about, and the word nerd has appeared in many episodes. We're all somewhere along the nerd scale if you're working in this particular, or working involved in this particular sector. Do you find that these people, both of you, you've got to tease out them to talk a different language, otherwise because they're so focused on their own internal things? James?
I think you've got to tell them.
Even better.
In many circumstances. Yeah. We find that we do end up, and it is a bit of a classic and maybe a slightly old school sales tool, but it's the classic kind of so what test.
Yeah.
And like I said before, our job is to sit on the other side of the table and assume the role of the customer who's going to be buying this product. Because at the end of the day, the technology, the launch, the space, all of these things are wonderfully exciting and they're visual, but we're in it for revenue. That's what it all comes back to. These are businesses, they have to make money. And so we kind of sometimes have to speak truth to power, and we listen to the technical language, and we're fascinated by it and we understand it, but we just keep coming back to that question, so what? I'm the customer, so what? Talk to me about the things that matter to me in a language that I understand. And it's that point of transition and translation, I think that's the job of PR, marketing, sales, is to be able to bring this cleverness, this nerdery, for want of a better phrase,
that's fine,
to bring that into sharp relief and explain it to the people that may want to buy this product in a way which makes them go, do you know what? Actually, I get this. This could help me. I think I might have some value in buying this.
And Helen, do you find that with your clients you get sort of Damascene moments when they're thinking, crikey Moses, I get it now? Or is it an education process to really take away any preconceptions they have about marketing?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the people we work with, I'm quite lucky, they do get it. They do understand the value of marketing. They do understand, and they do listen. Mm-hmm. So I think I'm quite lucky with that. But I have in the past had experiences where you have to educate them, and it's a bit of a process. Sometimes with good effect, sometimes maybe not. But it's kind of...
Because I think often, actually, space tech, and that's again almost an anachronism, the phrase itself, they are so inward looking, they don't understand how to communicate to their consumers what they were trying to achieve.
I think that's a common problem across tech.
Yep.
Generally. I think if we come back to what I think we're trying to get to here, which is what's the difference between marketing space technology and the difference between marketing terrestrial technology. There is, one of the things that really stands out to me is actually the opportunity for storytelling and to ignite that kind of childlike fascination that we all have with space. And I think that applies whether you are 15 years old or whether you're 55 years old like me. It's that it's still so I bet someone else has said this, but Final Frontier kind of element.
First reference to Star Trek in the
right.
series. Thank you very much. Ring the bell.
Sorry.
That's fine, ring the bell.
But even if we're talking about downstream, so what do the applications do? The upstream, the process of getting this stuff up there is fascinating people, right? Because it's rockets and it's noise and it's flame and it's power and it's acceleration. And actually that process of getting the technology to a point where it can start to deliver benefit from people is far more interesting in space tech than it is in terrestrial tech. Because we start to talk about people anywhere, about rockets and fuel and space entry and re-entry and all those sorts of things, and it people have a point of reference for that. If we deal, our clients, a lot of our clients are digging up roads and putting cable in the ground to achieve similar kind of end results, and you start talking to people like that, and they just go, it has no interest. It's just
Helen.
I think so. Most of what we both do, I think, is kind of helping our clients talk to their audience, so it's very much B2B. But if you look at the kind of wider consumer interest in space, and say what you will about SpaceX and Elon Musk, but that has definitely created a lot of interest in this space. There's so much going on now. There's also a lot of sort of talk because of bits falling out of the sky, of space junk and stuff, of course, but I think there's so much more general consumer interest in the sector because there's a lot happening and there's a lot of very influential people active in this sector.
So does space have an image problem?
Yeah.
Do you think so?
That's interesting.
I think to some extent. I mean, I think it's sort of there was a period of moon landings and stuff where there was, so much interest. I think it waned a little bit, to be honest. In the
it was normalised, wasn't it, in a way, when we got to the shuttle stage?
And when it's things like when it's astronauts going to space, yes, it's interesting and it's great, but there's lots of very plain things like enabling technology. It's vital, it's fantastic, all the things, if you look at what space enables, but it's maybe not quite as interesting.
I think there is, I think it's a really good point. I think there is a role for us as communicators to help the technology businesses, and bearing in mind that space technology, they are selling to other businesses, but help them, enable them to bring their end product to life for the ultimate consumer. And I'm sort of thinking of an example there was, we work with BT, and BT have been a long-term provider to Co-op. And over recent years, Co-op have been launching pop-up stores at festivals all across the country. And a young person at a festival, or an old person at a festival, you ask them, you spin back, what is, because they can walk into a pop-up Co-op store and they can put out their phone and they can transact a piece of business and they can buy something from that store. And all that data is flying out to space, around and back down again in milliseconds. They don't think about that. What they think is they now have an option to go to Co-op and buy a bottle of water for £1.75 rather than paying £7 at a burger stand for it. But actually, I think there's a great opportunity for the users of space technology to help tell the story and use space to bring that to life and to sell their services more effectively. Or actually, what we're talking about here is brand positioning, to position the brand and the value of their brand more effectively with their consumers. And I think when you can start to, so perhaps one of the reasons for people, an area where people are going to start to consider about space is the kind of just the crowded nature and the sustainability in that low Earth orbit space. What's happening? We're just throwing pieces of metal into the sky. At some point, they're all going to start to come down, or they're just going to run out of space and start bumping into. What happens then? So that idea of sustainability, but actually just linking that technology back to the fact that some of the environmental uses for it. So, for example, tracking endangered species, looking at being able to track emissions more effectively. So telling the stories around the good that space technology can deliver for society can help counterbalance some of those concerns or the apathy that people, that the end audience, which is ultimately the consumer, might start to feel about it.
It's funny, in the course of this series, phrases like golden age of space have come up, and that's from the perspective of the ease of getting up into space, the democratization of accessibility of payloads and launches, etc. But also, there's an all-pervasiveness of space, where you perhaps it's fading into the background, ironically. People take for granted that the GPS on their phone, etc., the fact they can do online banking, they can buy their burger in a Co-op van, and it's almost a caught in a rock and a hard place in terms of how do we keep it at the forefront of everything.
I know, so SSPI did these, I think they still do them, this Better Satellite World series, where they were trying to collate some videos and some testimonials of all those really unique and interesting use cases that space enables that you wouldn't be able to do otherwise, sort of thing. And I think things like that are really valuable, but what we're missing is getting that to the right audience, because if it's just the space industry seeing it, well, we already know, and that's great. So is there an argument for getting that out to the sort of general public? But the thing is that tech companies working in space, for example, I mean, from a very individual perspective, they need to sell to their customer. Yeah. And their customer is not the end consumer. Yes, there's that push if you make more general awareness. So it needs to be more of a coordinated approach. It's like, for the industry as a whole, it would benefit us to tell that story more, but then it needs to be coordinated or led by associations and something, just so that you can kind of push that.
I think what I'm seeing in enterprise organisations is space tech's got a real battle for budget on its hands. Yeah. I actually see those kind of more exploratory areas within organisations. They are the funding is quite low within them, and the challenge that they've got is AI, because it overwhelms the story from space, and everyone's going to throw the money into AI. So in terms of promotion, in terms of comms.
Well, I was going to say in terms of the content creation, does that negate? Question for you: are we seeing the death of space marketing taken over by algorithms? James, Helen, thank you very much. We're no longer needed, etc.
Was that?
But it's a very important point.
It's funny though, because I mean, it's the thing with AI. It's not there. It's not quite there yet. No. For one thing, obviously, in everything that it does. I mean, you only have to look at the recent cases of accidental news stories coming out that were actually completely wrong because the AI algorithm had got it wrong.
Yep.
And you really can recognise when content's been written by AI, you can tell, and AI can pick it up as well. So it doesn't tell the story as well. So I think there'll always in everything you talk about when you're looking at applying AI, you're going to need people at some point, using a bit of AI to help speed up processes. Great, whether that's content creation or writing software, that there's an argument, but there's always going to need to be someone making sure that it's not completely messed it up.
It's interesting. I was fortunate enough to do a course around AI at Side Business School. And we were looking at AI hallucinations and how they could be accidentally or purposefully created.
AI hallucinations. Explain that.
Okay, sorry. So essentially, we spoofed a large language model into writing a top 5, giving us the top 5 thriller novels of a particular year, with completely made up authors, but a really detailed synopsis of a completely made up plot as well. And so these things, I mean, that was with purpose. We were trying to do that right. But back to Helen's point, that's absolutely possible. So we use AI a lot in what we're doing, increasingly a lot in what we're doing now. But it comes back to the point. I think if you are producing just a technical sheet of paper that gives people, it does this for this reason, these things connect to that, it's this big, it goes this fast, fine, that's absolutely fine. That doesn't market, that doesn't connect with one human being to another human being. This idea of storytelling, I don't think that you get that from AI yet. We may do in the future. But the general rule that we apply is kind of 20, 60, 20. So there's 20% of human intellect and effort at the outset to make sure that your model is properly trained, that the prompts are correct, that you've understood the brief from the client, because actually getting the information out of the client to start with is something that AI won't do accurately. It'll start to make assumptions.
Yep.
There's around 60% of heavy lifting in the middle that we can get done, whether that's writing copy or content, whether that's deciding strategy, whether that's doing research. But then there's another 20% at the end of it, which is two things really. One is making sure that it's right, it's correct. And the other part of that is applying what we talk about, the human edge. Yeah. So that we're still in an age where people are buying, these are not cheap discretionary purchases. These are big infrastructure, critical purchases by the companies that are buying this technology, and it is still humans that are buying that from humans. The clients that we work with, almost 90% of their business will come through some form of formal procurement, and 99% of that will end up with a process that involves a bunch of people sat in a room with another bunch of people trying to decide if they believe each other, if they like each other, and actually they can work together, and that when things go wrong, they'll have each other's backs. Can't do that by machine at the moment. And getting to that point and building that level of trust and authority to enable both those sides to progress together as human beings is something you have to have that human input on to be able to support, so I believe.
That's very interesting, because when we were talking about this before we came on, we didn't even think about the subject of AI. I mean, that literally is the elephant in the room. And here we are at the end of April 2025. We had the government's initiatives announced early in January. We'd love to revisit this subject actually 12, 18 months' time, because, pardon, it will have accelerated faster than we expected to be the case. Can we talk about the differences in the type of businesses you work with?
Yeah.
And we've kept this series remarkably jargon-free. I committed the one sin of talking about technology readiness levels, and I got slapped firmly on the hands by the marketing department about that. I refer to them as TRLs, etc., which we all understand. Do you find that you have different challenges when you're talking to the downstream types of businesses, as opposed to the more glamorous, sexy hardware up there tootling around? Are there different challenges you have to consider, or are they what?
We're mainly working in downstream. Yeah. So actually, what are we doing with the data? What's the logic layer that sits over the top of that? How are we? What are the technologies, the hardwares, the applications that's enabling, and what does that deliver? Whether that's helping a water company manage its sewage outputs more effectively, actually whether it's helping a logistics company understand how they can shift stuff from A to B faster, more effectively, avoid traffic jams, stop shipping air about. So it's very much on those. So I guess from our perspective, the differential is being able to articulate. It might be the same product, but actually the outcome that's required by the different audiences that you're talking to. Yeah. And that might be a different geography with a different message. It might be a different industry with a different message. What we're seeing increasingly in where we work is around targeting big enterprise organizations, targeting other big enterprise organizations and treating them as a universe of one. So really developing value propositions for their product that speaks specifically to that company. But going back to the point I made earlier on,
yeah, sure.
In terms of trying to bring those stories to life, we will leverage shamelessly the upstream bit because it looks a lot more interesting.
Because it's the sizzle, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
It's a candle on the cake, so to speak.
And almost that's the bit that in kind of the morass of digital content that's out there at the moment. You just, the initial trick before your message, the information that you're seeing there, your call to action, it all comes to naught if no one actually sees it, looks at it and goes, that's got my interest, I'll click on it. And the upstream can be the thing that actually catches someone's eye and gets their interest. Well, that looks mind-blowing. Let's have a look at that.
Appealing to inner nerdiness, basically.
Yeah.
Here we are in our own space station. Exactly that.
That's a good point. I think other than that side of it, fundamentally the challenges are the same whichever area you're in, really. It's, ultimately it's about raising awareness and it's about getting that message right, as you say. So those are the same whichever bit you're looking at, basically, I would say.
Looking back over your careers in marketing, we all started off in a very different place to where we are today. And one of the conversations I had earlier, what would I have told myself 20 years ago? Probably something quite different. Is in that journey, what do you think has been the most innovative thing within marketing, which you're now applying to the business we're doing today?
I'd probably say the biggest change has been social media. When I first started, I started in a PR agency, and we were printing out. Do you remember printing out press releases and manually sticking a photo on the press release and putting it in the post to get to the journalist the next day? So quite a lot has changed in that time. But certainly that kind of sudden shift to social media, and there's lots of different channels. You have to be on there in some form, and it should support an overall marketing strategy. I think that sometimes it becomes the marketing strategy, whereas that doesn't. For some businesses that are sort of a local cafe, that's probably a good thing. But for most, and certainly in this industry, that it shouldn't be pure social media. But that sudden, that you need to be across all these channels, and they change so fast.
Yeah. I think for me to answer that, it's probably the obvious thing is to say the internet. But to move beyond that, I think the big shift that I've seen as someone that came into this industry and was a salesperson, ran sales teams for 20 years, it's the strategic shift in marketing. So marketing for years and years and years was seen purely as the kind of the bag carrier for sales. I need a deck, I need a leaflet, I need this, I need that. Let's go to marketing. They're the colouring in guys. Let's get them to go and let's go and get them to see if we can set them to stick within the lines. And what data has enabled us to do, and the ubiquity of data, is start to really attribute what's happening in marketing throughout that buyer journey to a revenue figure at the end of it. So when I first started out, revenue was just the territory of the salesperson, the sales leader. That was their number. It's top line, they owned it. Actually, that's much more of a collaborative effort. It's a team effort. To be successful at that top line, you have to have marketing completely integrated with sales, completely integrated with customer success, so that whether you're acquisition, whether you're growing dialogue, whether you're winning bids and proposals, whether you're getting renewals, it has to be multiple disciplines, multiple different intellectual approaches, knowledges and experiences that are pulling together in a singular way to deliver that one revenue win. I think that change is probably the biggest kind of cultural shift that I've seen within the B2B sector.
And what was the enabler for that? Because you talked about a more cohesive, more collegiate working together. Technology also played a key part in that, isn't it?
It's data. Data is the thing that has absolutely enabled that, because you're able to attribute more clearly to some activities that have happened 3, 6, 12, 18 months previously that might have been part of a strategy, a marketing strategy for that organisation. Whereas historically it simply would be the sales guys and the person's in the room, they've signed the deal, it's their win, boom, I'm a success.
Exactly, yeah.
Whereas actually people are able to look at this now and want to understand what have been all the contributing factors to get us there. Because, this is probably the other thing that's changed as well, is just the complexity. If in one way we're seeing massive increases from a selling perspective in terms of the number that people that are involved in making a buying decision. 10 years ago, that was probably a big buying committee would be 2 or 3 people. It's consistently 10, 12, 13, 14, 15. And buying technology is no longer is no longer just the responsibility of the CIO or the CTO and his team. Actually, if you are selling technology, yes, you've got to convince those people on a technical level, but you have to look more broadly to say, what impact does your technology have upon the other lines of business? How does it positively impact customer experience? How does it positively impact supply chain? And you have to be telling your story to those people, coming back to that phrase earlier on, about the things that matter to them in a language they understand. And the things that matter to someone, a chief operating officer that's responsible for making sure everything runs smoothly, it's all efficient in a factory, in a supply chain, whatever. His requirements might be fundamentally different to what the CTO wants. The CTO wants to keep him happy, but the CTO is ultimately not responsible for making sure that machine's still running. And the same on the flip side, from a customer perspective, in terms of making sure that your consumers, if you're a bank, you want to make sure your consumers are happy, that they're able to access their accounts wherever they are in the world, whether they're stood in the middle of Tesco's or they're stood in the middle of the Gobi Desert. You want to be able to give them that information and for them to feel confident that it's secure. So being able to deliver and tell that story around customer experience to the people that make those decisions and have responsibility for that is equally as important as you being able to tell a CTO or CTO how clever and how much investment and how big and how fast your data stream is.
And those subjects we talked about, it's almost where do you start? And do you find it a challenge communicating, though, educating as much as anything else, those particular groups? Because if you're a marketeer, talking to a marketeer, and I'm keeping it simple in that level, they understand what you're saying exactly. If you're talking to a CTO, a COO, etc., a chairman of a company, are they open to this, the way of thought?
Yeah, I think they completely are. I think the education starts with the people that are developing the products first. And I'm going to get this hideously wrong, but I think it was Steve Jobs that said, you've got to start with the customer and engineer your product back from there. Don't engineer your product and then go looking for an audience. I've done a terrible disservice. I'm sure he's far more articulate and eloquent than that. But essentially that is the point. Just think before you start developing something, what problem is it going to solve?
Yes.
Because we have seen in a number of instances, I'm not going to name any names, where someone's built something fantastically smart and clever and I've got one of these. Great, no one wants it.
It's funny, in my day-to-day, my day job outside of chatting to wonderful people like you, I work a lot with space startups. And you so eloquently said, so what? I said, so what is the benefit of that? You have that bright idea on a Friday night. What it does to help us as a business accelerate that development. And it really makes people think. It's a very great clarification question. Let's talk about the future. Here we are, sitting 600 miles above an little space astro caravan. Where do you see technology, where do you see marketing going? And is it just going to be a gentle evolution? Or is there something seismic just beyond the horizon?
Oh my God, well, that was a conversation stopper.
Well, we were thinking about the future. I mean, we've seen the rapid change in not even our lifetimes, in the last 5-10 years, what technology is enabled now. We talked about the open culture, the way in which you're communicating with your businesses, et cetera. How's that changing? Do you think that's setting a template for the next 10, 15 years, or is stuff like Parkinson's law expanding exponentially?
To my mind, look, AI is just a massive game changer. And the thing is, I don't think, if you're looking at generative AI, you don't know where it's going to stop, and you don't know how people are going to respond to that. So my suspicion is there's a period where you'll be able to humanize to a degree with AI, and people will adopt that. And if you think back to Tesco Club Card when that first came out, so I've probably a load of people in the audience go, when did Tesco
it's
Club
a loyalty
Card come out?
scheme for those younger people.
But actually, figuring out what people wanted to buy and putting their name and address on something and giving them coupons that was personalised to them was absolutely game-changing now. And that created a real competitive advantage for Tesco. It doesn't anymore. And I imagine that the kind of AI, generative AI art from a marketing perspective will do sort of the same thing, is that there'll be 3, 4 or 5 years where the people that really get out in front of it actually genuinely create themselves a competitive advantage because they can get to a bigger market with a higher degree of personalization a lot quicker. But actually people will then, as much as, if you've got an email that said, "Hi James," rather than "Dear
Customer,"
Sir, then that was groundbreaking. You thought they've really taken their time to think about me.
You know me.
And the same will happen with AI. You know, if you get a fantastically produced brochure at the end of, some point this year, which clearly has images that talk to you, that has language that speaks specifically to you, at this point in time, that will still look fundamentally clever, different, and eye-catching. In 18 months, it won't. Everyone will be doing that. So you've got to be thinking about how do you continue to add that human edge once the kind of wow factor and all the glamour and gloss has worn off of AI, and it's not just a few people that have it, it's become table stakes. Everyone's doing the same thing with it. How do you make yourself different?
And it's interesting because they are tools at the end of the day, aren't they? This is the cool thing about this conversation, because we talked about beforehand what the areas, but we're all evolving in a different direction. It's almost going to become, from the consumer's perspective, background. It's just a means of delivery. So is there a case for actually human creativity, the copywriters of the world, coming back into the fore to use these tools to make even better campaigns? Is that possible, you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think so, definitely. You're still, I think pairing that up together. I mean, I know so we do some work in the broadcast industry as well, and a lot of that, you obviously, you watch your Netflix and you get your personalised recommendations, etc. But there's quite a few companies where they actually use people to do the pull together content aggregation and look at recommendations and pull together different groups of content, because they kind of understand to a deeper level than AI, so they get a better experience at the end of it, but a bit more input. So I definitely think that you can have that AI will actually make it open up more opportunities, and then actually, but that storytelling part where you need people who understand it,
and it will become more immersive, won't it? I'm not saying everybody will be walking around with VR headsets, etc., to experience the stuff we're talking about today, but the means of delivery will change, won't it?
That's a perpetual challenge in kind of B2B, especially on big pieces of lumpy, expensive tech.
Yeah.
Is that if you've got a relatively low-cost SaaS subscription product, if someone wants to understand what it's like to work with your business and to work with your product, you go, great, have it. Use it for 3 months, see what you feel, and it's free, and then we'll start to charge you after that if you either love it or you've just forgotten to cancel your subscription. Actually, if you're buying a huge data infrastructure or a network or something like that, you can't do that. So how do you give? But interestingly, you're less able to give people a sense of how it works and what it feels like to work with you as a business.
Yep.
But it's a more critical, more expensive, more risk-heavy purchase. So that approach to being more immersive and being more experiential, that is, if you can nail that and give your buyers a sense of what it will be like to work with you, genuinely work with you, and how your product will perform, that gives you a massive competitive advantage. And it's not about cost, it's not about product features, it's about reducing risk. And I think as the margins of difference between technologies and the margin of difference between cost structures continues to decrease and get tighter and tighter and tighter, I think risk and helping businesses understand and manage risk will become an increasingly significant differentiator alongside sustainability, which I think is going to be another changing arc from a sales perspective and how you sell products to people. We support big customers on big bids, and we're already, and we have been for the last year and a half, we're seeing bids come in, mostly from the public sector at the moment, but we're seeing bids come in that are scoring a potential supplier's performance on sustainability and social value higher than they're scoring their commercial proposal, which is a massive game changer.
I mean, it's very interesting. So from our perspective as a technology provider, and this is not talking about what we do in our day-to-day job, you hit the nail on the head. So companies we're working with who are designing rockets, the shiny stuff which goes out there, it's what is the impact on the life cycle assessment of it? What's the footprint? What's the legacy of it going to be? And one of the interesting things about what we talked about over the last 6 episodes is there are certain key things which need to be defined better. Sustainability, what do people mean by that?
Yeah.
People are jumping onto it almost as a greenwashing opportunity. It's trendy to talk about it, etc. But you can't really meaningfully compare the 1 million plus pieces of debris tootling around at 17,000 miles an hour, which will cause you serious heartache, to the garbage patches in the Pacific Ocean. But there needs to be a clear understanding of what it's all about. And I think that's only going to happen with time, as much as anything else. With time, we've come to the end of our slot, I'm afraid.
Oh.
The orbit is approaching for recovery back to where we came from. I would just like to say this is a fascinating conversation. We went off in directions today, which I think for all of us were slightly surprising, but slightly interesting as well.
Yeah.
But we, as I said, these conversations are meant to be organic. It's been an absolute pleasure, James, to meet you today, and Helen, to have you on board as well. And for everybody who's been watching episode 6, thank you very, very much indeed. We've been loving the comments we've been getting as the series has been going out, and so with all the best endings, you must like, subscribe, and look forward to seeing and ringing the bell. Everybody who does take part in this subscription service will be contacting you later for a prize draw. So when you have that bright idea on a Friday night, we can help you take the product to more developed stages. So Bruce Poston from Liftoff saying thank you very much for taking part. James, Helen, safe journey back.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.